Stand! Stand! Stand!
You want to dance? Ask me nicely. Let's talk. Better listen very carefully.
No problem.
You having fun?
No!
Thanks.
Hello, and welcome to jean-claude Van Damme, episode 17. This is the podcast where we watch Van Damme films because, well, I don't know sometimes. Joining me today is my guest, Sean Malloy, who was on the last episode, Universal Soldier, and he is back to talk Derailed. How are you doing, Sean?
I'm doing well. I've been looking forward to discussing what is deemed the worst of all Van Damme films.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Oh man, yeah, last episode we did talk about you coming back on to do this. Our schedules just kind of meshed up to do it again pretty quickly in succession. So we're going to do this, and again, this is the only Van Damme film I've actually dreaded revisiting. There's still some I haven't seen, but this is the only one I was just dreading doing for the podcast, so I figured, why not just yank it off like a Band-Aid and just get it over with?
Well, and I think as the fans, first of all, I think the only people who are ever going to see this film are fans of Jean-Claude, but I feel like your scale is excellent with Bloodsport being the best, Derailed being the worst. So I feel like as fans and as listeners, we really need to pick apart Derailed and figure out, okay, if Derailed is the echelon for the worst of the worst, let's figure out why it is bad, where it goes wrong, and if there are by chance any redeeming qualities in this thing.
There's maybe a handful. I'll give it that. But yeah, no, of course. And we'll get to that at the end, of course, with the rating system. But yeah, I've been using this jokingly in my Van Dammage rating system since I started this show. This being a number one on the very low end of the spectrum, all the way up to Bloodsport being like the pinnacle of Van Damme films. Yeah, and also just to throw this out there, when I started my website, Crush Celluloid, with my partner Cole, over 3 years ago, this is the first thing I ever wrote about for the website.
Wow.
The first thing I started was a column that I was doing just about Die Hard ripoffs. And this is just a movie I hadn't seen. I was like, ooh, Van Damme Die Hard ripoff I haven't seen. Watched it, absolutely loathed it, and then that's the first thing I ever wrote for the site, was about this.
Well, it's not only a Die Hard ripoff, but it is a ripoff of Under Siege 2, which in itself was a Die Hard ripoff. So there's a lot of interesting things about this one.
And this movie kind of makes Under Siege 2 look like a masterpiece.
It really does. It really does.
Oh, man.
So,
yeah, but who would have thought Eric Borgesane would have been a much more interesting villain than whoever the fuck not John Malkovich is in this movie?
Oh my God, there's a lot that we need to talk about. One of which is the villain. That's one of the things that I was gonna talk about as well. I don't want to say that this one is a missed opportunity at all for Van Damme. It was, and that was one of the things I was going to get into. This one is pretty much a paycheck role. It is Van Damme. Pretty much,
it's a desperation role.
It's a desperation role. It's Van Damme fully accepting his role as a direct-to-video star and picking up something that was a quick and was an easy paycheck, because there is absolutely nothing original about this in any way. It kind of left me speechless. I distinctly remember actually when I first heard that he signed on for this, and it was weird because he had pretty much established himself as a direct-to-video star at the moment. And I remember reading about it, and it was like, really? At this point, the whole idea came so late. It was at the point this came out in 2002, so I remember this was announced around 2001, and it was like, really? Mm-hmm. A Die Hard ripoff on a train? Like, hasn't this been done?
Yeah, well, but I guess maybe he thought, like, that could do pretty well for him because his other Die Hard ripoff, Sudden Death, did pretty well. Like, maybe he's like, hey, maybe they like it when I do this.
Well, and, what's interesting, and, back in the 90s, okay, they had, various Die Hard ripoffs coming out, okay, and it pretty much became Die Hard on a plane, Die Hard in a hockey stadium, Die Hard on an oil rig. They were all... So it was just interesting this came out. It was Die Hard on a train, and wait a minute, wasn't that already done? And if you actually go and
Several times by this point.
several times, and exactly, that's what I was going to say, is if you look, the whole Die Hard on a Train thing had been done already. I mean, not just counting Under Siege 2, but there was another one that came out with Arnold Vosloo called Con Express, I believe. So I never saw it. But I mean,
Ooh, that one I haven't seen, but there's also The Last Siege, aka Hijack, aka The Last Siege Never Surrender, starring Jeff Fahey and Ernie Hudson, which I also wrote about for that column.
I have not seen that one either. Is that one better than this?
No,
okay.
No. It gives it a run for its money, definitely. That's because I reread those articles before we did this, and I was like, okay, well, maybe there is something worse than Derailed out there, because apparently I hated that one even more.
And what's funny about this one is, let's face it, the only reason I watched this, or anyone for that matter, I imagine, picked this up, is because if you're a fan of Van Damme, you're gonna be loyal and you're gonna be Legion, you're gonna check it out. But I was watching this actually, and my wife came in the room. And she came into one of the scenes or whatever, and she was just like, "Oh my god!" And just having to try and rationalize it, like, "No, baby, it's Van Damme. See, it's okay. I mean, it's not great. He's done better stuff."
Yeah, but he's still here. He's trying, I guess.
Yeah, no, it's No, like I said, I've been looking forward to getting into this one because, like I said, we need to pick apart. If this is going to be the echelon for the worst, let's figure out why it's the worst. Maybe what Van Damme should not do in the future.
Well, okay. So last time you were on the show, you gave us kind of your Van Damme history rundown. I just have a specific question for you. Did you rewatch this movie for the podcast?
Yes, I did.
So, how many times have you seen this movie now?
Oh God.
Be honest.
Think about this. Be honest. Okay. Well, when I'm going to be honest. I bought it. Okay. I bought it on the day of its release because as a Van Damme fan, that's what you did. So I'm going to say now I've seen it a total of 4 times.
Okay.
And that's
I thought maybe it'd be a little bit higher. I thought maybe it was going to be 2 higher than me. Yeah, this is the second time, and it was definitely a bit of a chore. This movie makes me like viscerally angry. Like I get frustrated. I had to take like 2 different breaks while watching this movie for like 5 or 10 minutes just to pace around a bit and be like, why are they making any of these choices?
And it's not just that, but I mean, and this is one of the things that I'm going to come back to, but it's just so weird for, Van Damme to have picked this role up. I really do, at this stage in his career. Because like I said, he was in direct-to-video purgatory. But if you look at the films that he had done prior to this, he was trying some new stuff. I mean, there's Replicant, which was awesome. He did another one that came about a year before this one called The Order, which is goofy, is silly, but he's, again, trying something new. So it was just so bizarre, not only when I heard that he signed on for this, and then when it came out, it was just, it just seemed not so much desperation as just, he figured, okay, well, you know what, I'm going to be in Bulgaria anyway, because this is a European production through and through.
Oh, yeah.
And he just figured, it's an easy check. But what's interesting to note is the film that he did right after this was In Hell, which was, again...
Yeah, I was wondering, was that the same year, or was that 2003?
That was the same year, because on the DVD, on the... Okay. I don't know if you saw it or not, but there's a making of behind the scenes thing, and they interview Van Damme for it, and he is in his full on I don't want to say costume, but he's on set doing In Hell, and so he has that wicked looking look that he sported in Hell.
Oh, cool. So yeah, I guess another thing that we have to take into account at least somewhat is that he also uses as an opportunity to get his son a bit of a bigger role in a movie.
Yep, that's his son's in the movie.
Chris Van Damme does come back, who we mentioned briefly in the Universal Soldier episode, but yeah, no, he plays his character's son in the movie, and there is more Chris Van Damme in this movie than I think I've seen in any other movie.
At this point, yeah, and He does have, I don't want to say that he has really the presence quite yet, but he definitely does display some of his dad's physicality. I mean, they obviously give him a plum roll in the beginning to show off a kick that he learned from his dad. So that was kind of a nice
He does
touch.
more spin kicks in this movie than Van Damme does.
He does, and that's one of the Van
At
Damme
2,
tropes.
he does more than Van Damme does.
Yeah, and that's one of the Van Damme tropes that is sadly missing from this one.
Because all I have is just that his son does 2 spin kicks. But yeah, he doesn't do that. He doesn't do any splits. I guess we'll run down a couple of the tropes real quick, because there's not a lot in this movie. It hits just about every one of the Die Hard tropes, but just not the usual Van Damme tropes. Of course, nudity, shirtlessness. No way, Jose. Not for this movie.
No,
he's not even going to get dirty. He's not going to get in a wife beater. Like, that leather jacket is staying on the whole time.
Dude, I am so glad you brought that up, because I feel like one of the tropes of the Die Hard movies is you have your hero, your protagonist, who throughout the movie, because he is just getting beaten down, he pretty much, I don't want to say sheds his clothing, but yeah, you see him in various stages. Like if you look at Die Hard, if you look at Sudden Death, our hero is just getting him. He's going, it's all in one day. So yeah, by the end of the film, he's in a wife beater, he's in a t-shirt, and he's bloodied and he's
sweat
beaten.
stains, bloody.
Yes,
yeah,
sweat stains. That was always always one of the great things about McClane, was just by the end of the film, he was in this wife beater and he was just beaten down. In Derailed, Van Damme is in that leather jacket, man, the entire thing. I mean,
he gets a little sweaty at times, and he's doing a lot of, physical activity. Never takes the jacket off.
Never takes that
cools down
jacket
just
off.
a little bit.
Never takes that jacket off. It is a nice jacket. I've never owned a leather jacket, so I guess if I did, I might wear it all the time as well, like he does. So
yeah. There's not a whole lot of, like, slow-mo screaming in this, really. There's a little bit, but... Okay, let's talk a little bit about the editing in this movie before we run through the rest of the tropes, because I think it's one of the worst parts about it. And I don't know how true this is, but it seems true with the way it's edited, but the average shot length, according to IMDb, is 1.53 seconds. That's
I read that as well.
Shot lasts in this.
I read that as well, and it sounds about right. The editing as well was something that I noticed. There was a bit of a distraction. It's pretty much the director, or whoever it was editing it. I'm assuming the director had, his say in this, but pretty much watched a few MTV videos or whatever and decided, I want to make my film look unique and cool in some kind of way, give my film a little bit of flavor, but it doesn't work. It looks so silly, and it just doesn't have the payoff that you would think. I mean, it just looks cheap and, rushed.
It's annoying in the way that, like, when Rob Zombie directed House of a Thousand Corpses and was really excited to direct a movie and tossed in all these really annoying, irritating editing tricks into his films that didn't make any sense to the actual story, that's what this is like.
No, that's exactly what this is like. And I knew, you pretty much know when you go right into the film, at the beginning, in the opening, like 2 minutes or whatever, when the thief, I believe her name is Galena, right?
Played by Laura Herring, who most people probably know from, like, Mulholland Drive.
And see, I recognized her from The Punisher. If you remember, she was she was John Travolta's wife. But yeah, once she steals the virus in that opening scene, and how it does like a circular kind of closeout shot, I was thinking, what the hell is this? Like,
there's so many like that. Okay, so back to the tropes a little bit. Nationality, his name is Jacques Christophe. What else do you need? He's just French or whatever, I guess. I mean, his family is pretty much American completely, but he is very much French.
And that's one of the things about this one is so unabashed and honest about it being strictly European. I mean, there really isn't anything American a whole lot about this. It's set in Europe. It's filmed in Europe.
Except a lot of the actors.
I mean, his name is Jacques Christophe. He's boarding a train that is clearly European. They're being chased by it doesn't even really play with the whole... I mean, you'd think if it's going to be set in Europe, you'd think it would kind of play with that a little bit, but it just kind of is there, I feel, and doesn't...
Yeah, they're just in Austria, and they're on a train.
Yeah, exactly. They're in Austria, they're on a train. It doesn't play with that at all,
And again, yeah, just like his wife, his 2 kids, they're just very American, no accents or anything, but he is just French, I guess.
Yeah, There's
not
French.
much talk to his nationality, but drinking, dancing, no, neither of those. sad. He could have used a drink on this train, I feel like.
Yeah, he's getting...
And Personal Vendetta, not really, at least as far as the way the plot goes to the side of him. Basically, until the very diehard trope of his family is in peril. That's the only time he gets a personal vendetta against the bad guy. True.
Yeah, and he was getting a little older at this point in his career, and I think you can definitely tell in some of the various scenes. It really shows. I don't want to say that he looks tired in this film, because I'm going to argue, we'll get to this later on, I imagine, but I'm going to argue that there are some performances later on in his career that I think are actually a little worse than this one. He does bring a little bit... I actually think Van Damme is actually the best thing about this film, but there are some films that he did later on in his career that I'd say he is definitely more phoning in those performances than he is in this one, but even still, you can tell he appears very tired.
Yeah, he does seem quite tired in this. I feel like he doesn't give a very good performance, except when he does, like, his family scenes in this. Like, when he's getting to actually act with, like, his son and stuff, I feel like he actually does a bit, because there is, of course, his son doesn't die in the movie, but there's, like, a scare, and, like, he thinks that his son has died in the movie, and he actually emotes in that scene. He acts in that scene, and I was actually kind of impressed this time around watching that scene.
And I was impressed as well with that scene, because I don't think, I can only count maybe just a couple other scenes in his filmography where jean-claude has really emoted that much emotion, and I always thought it was interesting for being such a low budget, clunky, diehard rip-off film that goes direct to video. One of his best emotional performances happens to be in this film. So that is one of the shining points in this film. I will say it right now, I think it is complete bullshit that his son comes back. I imagine we're getting into that, but they don't explain at all where his son was hiding, how he was able to get the magical virus. It's bullshit.
Well, I guess it's just it was too dark.
It was too
but
dark.
No, like, again, again, when you think his son, I mean, of course you don't think it's actually going to happen because of these types of movies, but when you think for a moment his son is maybe dead, and he just, like, wails and screams and cries, like, that is actually pretty decent acting. And then, of course, 10 minutes later, any of that tension, any of that, anything you felt for that character is just immediately gone. It's like, oh, the son's just there. He just hid somewhere, I guess, for a while. He just pops back up. It cheapened the whole thing.
His son pops up at the 11th hour, and it's given, just like there's so many other things in this film that I feel is not given explanation to, but that is one of the things as well, where it's like, it almost feels like the writers or the director or whoever just figured, okay, you know what, let's just screw it. Get it in the can, finish it. No one's going to care. You know what I mean? And we'll just move on. We have a tax write-off here. Come on.
Yeah, and I don't know the exact budget for this thing. I wasn't able to find that or really gave much of a care in looking it up. But, I mean, I'm sure it wasn't much. It was probably a couple $1 million tops. Say maybe $3 million at the very top.
And how much of that went toward Van Damme's salary is interesting to note as well. I don't know, but that's something to consider as well.
I feel like at most he'd maybe pull $1 million at this point in 2002 for a movie like this, but I feel like it'd probably be less. I feel like it'd probably be like 500 to 750.
I don't know. He talks about, in JCVD, there's an excellent scene where he's talking to his agent or whatever, and his agent is trying to bring him a script or whatever, and he is just like, okay, well, the budget is this much. How much am I getting? Okay, so that means we're left over with this much anyway. You can't make a good film on, this much budget when half of it is going to me. You know what I mean? And I feel like that is definitely apparent in this one.
Yeah, okay, so I guess let's just kind of jump into the film. I have to say, even the opening font looks cheap in this movie.
Well, can I say
like,
before...
even the opening credits look cheap.
Well, and can I say, even before we get even there, what really gives it away that this film is cheap is the DVD cover. I don't know if you picked up on that or not.
The poster is horrible.
Well, not only is it horrible, okay, you have, explosion in the background, I mean, every trope that is unique to direct-to-video action titles is on here. You have the explosion, you have the train, you have him on a motorcycle, but the image they chose of him was from Black Eagle, which was like, 10, 11 years prior? Like, they couldn't even find a stock image of him that is somewhat recent. It is from Black Eagle, which was his very first movie.
Yeah, well, okay. Well, to be fair, the Black Eagle DVD cover is an image of him from Lionheart, but they just put a kind of like Russian eagle tattoo on his chest.
Which
but
he
he's
does...
wearing like the one-piece black swimsuit that he wears in the pool fight in Lionheart.
True, yeah, but that was one of the things I distinctly remember when this came out. I was like thinking, really? Like they couldn't even find an image of him, more recent? Okay, all right, we'll go with it.
He's not going to come back to do promotional material for that. Plus, he's 2002 direct-to-DVD Van Damme. They probably want to make him look a little bit younger, more spry on the cover, perhaps.
Possibly. So anyway, yeah, I had to throw that one out there, but I gotta love that stock footage photo.
God, this...
And I also,
let
me just point this out as well.
I'm trying to remember the cuts already.
And I'm sorry, but the other thing about the cover that I thought was hilarious is it says, okay, so he has Van Damme, a deadly virus, only one way to stop it. And then it has the title, Derailed, and then underneath, a film by Bob Mizorowski. I'm sorry, have you ever heard of Bob? Like, is he a name to where?
No, I think this is the last movie he directed, and I think the movie he's most known for doing was the 1999 movie Shark Attack with Casper Van Dien.
Nice, okay. So Casper Van Dien, Jean-Claude on his resume. Yeah,
the two writers of this movie as well. I don't recall their names, but they did a lot of like direct-to-video remakes of kind of 70s and 80s horror movies. Like they did a 2004 remake of like Toolbox Murders. They did a 2009 remake, Night of the Demons. Just these very shoddy B horror movies with like D-list stars in them.
Interesting. Okay. All right. Sorry. Go. Yeah. Let's continue with this one.
And I do, as we're getting into it, I do just want to toss out that the working title for this movie was Death Train, and I kind of like that better. I think I might like this movie a little bit better if it was called Death Train.
Okay, all right. I don't know if that's going to make it much better, but okay, all right. Maybe if the train is actually on a collision course and is destroying things in its path, I could see that, but it's not doing that, so...
Well, but there's a deadly... bioweapon on it, and everyone is dying. It is a train full of death. It is a death train.
It is a death train. Okay, all right. Well,
I don't know. Just
okay.
Derailed is it's even hard to search for this movie, kind of, because IMDb, Google, anyone. If you just type in Derailed, guess what pops up? The 2005 movie with Clive Owen and Jennifer Aniston, or whatever.
And what's funny is I remember when that movie came out as well, and thinking, oh. The second movie with the title Derailed, the first was actually a Van Damme. Does anyone know that one? And no one did. Nope. Okay, so we'll move on.
The opening scene is just the super thief lady played by Laura Herring. I don't remember her name. She's just Laura Herring to me. She steals a bioweapon out of a mansion thing. We get to see her do some flips and kicks and stuff. She's a thief.
She's a thief, and we get to see that she is also a femme fatale, using her looks and her body to get what she wants. She's super sexy, and we know that because she's wearing pigtails. So that right there.
I forgot the whole first scene where she distracts the guard and ends up dropping him. Yeah, she is wearing pigtails and just like, oh no, I'm just a little woman. My car is broke down. What do I do?
Yeah, no, it's her character. Her character is interesting because I guess I said that the film is unoriginal, and I guess in most aspects it is. But I guess the fact that they team Van Damme up with this high tech, badass, ass kicking thief or whatever is kind of an interesting touch. It's weird and it doesn't really play with the rest of the film, but it I guess that is a slight stroke of originality there.
Well, and the actress Laura Herring herself, like, she's actually a pretty decent actress. She kind of pulls this movie off. Like, it's, she's suiting for it, I guess. It's not great, but yeah, I suppose the female character is a little bit better than most, like, female sidekicks in this movie. But at the same time, there is just a lot of her using her body and being, beaten and over-sexualized and stuff like that as well.
Yeah, no, you can tell. I mean, she's trying in this film. You can tell that she's trying, and on that making of special feature that's on the disc or whatever, they interview her, and you can tell she this is a role that she really wanted. I mean, this is like one of her first real main starring roles that had more than just a couple lines. So yeah, she took this seriously, and she's trying to bring it. Not the greatest actress, no, but she's working with what she's got.
Well, I understand that, and I could see, especially at this point, because at this point she had just done, like, Mulholland Drive, and that wasn't a huge hit or anything. It became more of, like, a cult hit. But, yeah, I could see this, her being like, oh, I get to star in an action movie with one of the top-tier action stars. Hell yeah. Like, that probably seemed like a pretty good career move for her.
Yeah.
While, at the same time, Naomi Watts was out there doing The Ring around this time, so, yeah.
Yeah, no,
Careers,
I mean,
they're funny.
Yeah, and she, maybe no one told her at this point. She thought, oh man, I get to be in a Jean-Claude Van Damme movie. Okay, this could be great for my career. I don't know if maybe her agent told her, yeah, he's now in direct-to-video now, and this is a Under Siege 2 ripoff that came out about 7 years ago. But yeah, no, it's going to be a huge hit.
Yeah. So we meet Van Damme, Jacques Christophe, and he's on vacation. He's hanging out with his wife and kids. It's his birthday. Kind of similar to, like, it might as well be Christmas.
Yeah, no, and this, this was probably the biggest thing. One of the biggest things that pissed me off about this film is that they make him an agent, okay? They make him a secret agent who is apparently leading a double life to his family, yet they don't go anywhere with that whole idea whatsoever. He's apparently like a Harry Tasker type figure from True Lies or whatever. His family thinks that he's in banking. He is actually a secret agent, and they don't go anywhere with that. The film doesn't do anything with that at all, which I think was probably one of the biggest problems with the film.
Well, yeah, and this is how little it does with it, because later on his family winds up on the same train that he's on, protecting this woman and the bioweapon that she stole. His wife and kids come into their room after she had just, like, gone into the bathroom or whatever. They discover that there's this half-naked woman in the cart with them, and there's this whole big thing. For one, he doesn't do anything to help himself in this scene. He doesn't be like, oh, I'm actually a secret agent, I'm protecting this woman, blah, blah, blah. She doesn't speak up and say anything for him. Nothing is said that could try to clear this up at all. It was at this point, I think it was lost on me that his family didn't know that he was, like, some kind of an agent, and that they thought he was a banker or something. So yeah, when that happens, and then that's about it. Like, his wife is mad at him, and then they have a brief fight in a train car where it's just like, for 20 years you just lied about everything, and then it's all okay and they love him again.
Yeah, and I honestly feel, you know what, what the writers really should have done is they should have just made, he was a family man. I mean, he could have been like a former CIA operative who is retired, but make him on vacation with his family. Then it would make sense that his family is on this train with him. They're on vacation or whatever. But the whole fact that he is, an agent of some kind, keeping this secret from his family or whatever, escorting, that just opens a whole can of, nonsense worms that isn't necessary.
You would have to explore if you're going to do that. I mean, you could have made it a thing to where, like, as far as his family knows, he used to do this, but he's more or less retired, and maybe he just does some consulting jobs now, but he's actually still doing the real jobs on the side because he still gets a thrill out of it and still wants to do it or something. Like,
that would have been interesting.
Something to where it's not like, oh no, so actually our hero was just a complete asshole and has been lying to his entire family for 20 years.
Lying to his family, and I also didn't understand how, his allegiance to that guy who gave him the client or whatever, whose name was Lars or whatever. I didn't understand how, he just had to be so yes sir to the guy, and not even, he's on vacation with his family. You know what I mean? I mean, just say no, tell him, give it to someone else. I've been with the organization. They never really say. I'm assuming he's with NATO. I mean, that's kind of what I got the vibe of. He was a NATO operative. But yeah, I didn't understand why, he just had to immediately, and just how they kind of throw it away where he's all, how do I explain this to my wife? I don't know. And then, I mean...
The end. And then it's like, yeah, I got to go do a thing. I'll be back in a couple of days. And I guess maybe he tells him, like, where he's going or what train he's going to be on or something, because his family shows up in his exact train car, which is also weird because he does switch train cars with the Texas oil guy, who is another character we'll talk about, but he switches train cars with the guy, And that's something that confuses the bad guys that had a tip-off and knew they were going to be on that train, but his family just shows up immediately to the correct train car?
Yeah, it's complete plot convenience. I mean, it's way too silly. I remember when this first came out, seeing it, thinking to myself, "Oh, come on." Like, you know, I mean, they show up with a birthday cake and everything. I honestly feel like if they tightened this up a little bit in the writing department, and perhaps maybe this would have excised the Galena character, I don't know. But I honestly feel like he should have been on that train from, you know, point A with his family, and they could have done something with that. That would have definitely kind of cleared up some of these plot holes a little bit more.
You know what? You know what would have made just as much sense and maybe worked a little bit better? How about this whole side thing with Galena and the terrorist group and the bioweapon? How about that all happens on the side, outside of Van Damme? Van Damme is a NATO agent or something. He's going on vacation with his family for his birthday. He happens to get on this train just at the same time that Galena is on the train trying to make it to Munich so she can sell the bioweapon. And then the terrorists come on to get the bioweapon back. And now Van Damme has to do it, and maybe guess what? They're both hiding and running around, and they run into each other and have a fight scene and then end up working together. You know, like a Die Hard movie.
Marcus, I think you just cracked the safe right there. No, that would have been 10 times better. I mean, you know, then it definitely hits the whole Die Hard trope of, you know, the thing about the Die Hard tropes is it's always the guys in the wrong place at the wrong time, and this would have definitely hit that. I think if you did that, though, then you would have, then we wouldn't have gotten any of the silly action scenes at the beginning where we're in Galena's studio or whatever. But you know what? That was pretty ridiculous and could have done without that as well.
And I will say, you did mention, like, tightening up this movie. Like, I think that's part of it, is that it couldn't really get too much tighter because this movie is already right under 90 minutes. If they tightened up too much more, this would have barely been a feature-length movie. If they really tightened up some of the loose ends on this.
Yeah, no, I mean, you know, in the first, you know, a couple action sequences are, you know, I mean, look, in the world of direct-to-video action, especially in the early 2000s, you know, you got to do things, you know, on such a smaller budget. And so compared to the bigger stuff, it looks silly. But the first couple action sequences are green screened, and they just look ridiculous. And I felt so bad for Van Damme because, I mean, what a... you know, and I'll watch him and whatever. Don't get me wrong, but you know, considering, you know, the stuff.
Honestly,
that
if he made a Derailed sequel, I would watch it.
Oh,
like,
yeah,
I would.
You know, but it's just ridiculous. The whole action sequence in Galena's studio, where it appears that she was waiting for him and she knew that the army was going to be coming for her because she had the whole place booby trapped.
That's the thing, yeah, and this is like in a theater that she was doing some production at or something, because she apparently was also like a circus performer or something at some point that we find out later. But yeah, immediately, it's shit like this. There's barely anything established, and there's already a weird fight scene in a theater, and who are these people and what's going on? I have no idea.
Well, I swear it almost feels like she was waiting for him. And, you know, I mean, you know, we talk about alternate, you know, paths this whole script could have taken. Clearly they had an idea for her character. And I almost think what I think could have been an interesting movie as well is Van Damme just having to escort this master thief who also is a performer in some kind of way. You know, him having to escort her throughout Europe and her using her theater tricks, you know, around you know, country to country. That could have been cool as well. I mean, they could have done something with that as well. But once they get landlocked on that train, you know, the whole aspect of her being this theater performer with disguises and everything goes completely nowhere.
There's this whole big chase scene. Like, all this action, it's shot poorly, it's choreographed poorly, and it's edited like they barely had a usable take anywhere. That's what I think part of, like, having the maybe 1.5 to 2 second takes at a time. It seems like they barely had a usable take anywhere, and they just kind of had to cut and paste everything together.
You know, they did. And then, you know, Jean-Claude commandeers a cab, the gas station explosion. You know, we have great use of CGI. I don't know if you picked up on this, but even the sparks on the cab, that is CGI as well. I mean, you know, you're dealing with some low-budget stuff when they CGI in the sparks. You know, it's...
Well, yeah, it's a poor mix of CGI and, like, green screen, because there's a point where the taxi cab kind of gets up on its side, like actually careening across on the side of the taxi, and it cuts to inside the taxi, and you see Van Damme, like, in front of obvious green screen with stuff going on. But then, like, they get out of the taxi, and you actually see, like, a car blow up, or maybe not, no, the car explosion is actually CGI, but then it cuts back and it's like a practical, like they blew something up, there's pieces of a car on fire.
Yeah, and again, this goes, and I honestly feel what they were trying to do, in my opinion, these films kind of try and copy, the bigger budget things that are done better. If you remember, I looked at this as The Rock. If you remember The Rock, before, when Nicolas Cage was trying to recruit Sean Connery to show that Sean Connery was a bit of a, curmudgeon who didn't want to go, didn't want to help them out or whatever. They go on this big chase or whatever, where they're careening through San Francisco and everything. It doesn't really do much to the plot, but it establishes that Sean Connery is a tough guy who doesn't want to do this, and again you have an excuse to blow some shit up and everything. I think this was trying to hit that, but again, when it's on such a tiny budget and it's going to look as ridiculous as it is, if the action's going to take place mostly on the train, just get to the train, especially if there's not going to be a payoff for this.
Well, and that's the weird thing about this entire scene, because for one, like, there's actually some decent practical explosions throughout this movie, whether they're done with models or whatever, but there's some good, you can tell, practical explosions, but they always add in or put them around terrible CGI that's just, the whole thing is off-putting, because if they just stuck with one thing, if it was all shitty CGI, you could maybe be like, oh, it's a low-budget production, that's just what they had to work with, they didn't have the budget for, like, practical effects. If it was all practical explosions and miniature work and stuff, then, like, I could be like, oh, that's crafty, at least they tried something, instead of just using crappy CGI. But they mix the two in such a baffling way, and even this entire scene, they get a taxi like they're being chased, and instead of just getting into a taxi and being driven away, Van Damme throws the taxi driver into the road, causes a big ruckus, and then immediately causes this chase scene that didn't need to happen.
Yeah, that didn't need to happen. I mean, and you hit the nail on the head when you said, this film was under 90 minutes. I'm actually looking at the case right now. It clocks in at, I think, with credits and everything, 89 minutes. So I feel like stuff like this was thrown in merely just to pad the running time. You know what I mean?
This is probably about 84, 85 minutes without credits.
Yeah, 84, 85 minutes, and I feel like it's kind of just thrown in there, oh, this is an action movie. Action movies have car chases and escape scenes. Here you go. Yeah, I mean, it's so ridiculous. But again, I was just amazed when I saw the scene in the studio where she's fending off those guards and she hooks Van Damme up to a harness and she has a harness and everything. I was like, what is this? Like, I thought this was supposed to be on a train. It's just, like I said, it's weird. And I feel like, if they're going to have such a oddball, interesting character like that, maybe make like a Mr. and Mrs. Smith type thing where he and her have to team up and are, like I said, trying to get from point A to point B. But if they're going to be on a train, which is already confined, and they're not going to do anything with those character traits, then what was the point?
Yeah, no, because even once they get on the train, once the terrorists take over, they're more or less separated for the majority of the rest of the movie.
And then she gets sick. She gets sick, so she's sidelined for the action, for the third act of the film. So
yeah, which again, we can talk about this. So Van Damme seems to be the only one that doesn't get the slightest bit visually sick, even though he was arguably exposed to more of that than anyone else because it broke right next to his head.
Yeah, well, and can we talk about that as well? The thing, this is a trope of, I would say, direct-to-video action movies, but it seems like back in the 90s and early 2000s, they always had the virus, you know what I mean? They always, the most deadliest virus or whatever. I'm not into viruses, I'm not in the medical field or anything, but, call me crazy, I would think, a virus of this magnitude or whatever would not be carried in a compact case. And it seems like they do this in the light of these cheap movies. This virus is just being handled and carried around like it's a compact. Like, it's just in a pocket.
Yeah, it's like a little pocketbook. I mean, you think if anything, like you see this in a lot of things to where it might be like two different chemicals that have to like mix together to become volatile or something. Like that's at least something. But yeah, it's just a little pocket case with a couple little vials. And very early, once the terrorists kind of get swinging, like the thing just breaks and then everyone on the train is sick. And they have it because the virus is like a mix of smallpox and a couple of other like airborne agents. so they have this thing where, like, okay, so if you were born before 1973 or something, you still got smallpox shots. So if you're an older person, it's not going to affect you as fast, but it's still going to affect you, and all the children are being infected immediately because they stopped being vaccinated for smallpox. That makes sense. That's actually a halfway decent idea. But I think him and his wife are the only two that really don't get that visibly sick in the movie. Even everyone else is like kind of slowly starting to get it. Wouldn't that be an interesting thing? If in addition to the Die Hard thing of kind of being beaten and thrown around throughout this entire movie, if he's slowly coming down with smallpox during all of this.
Oh no, that would have been cool.
And it's a race against time for him to even try to fight the bad guy because he's losing strength, and you see him start to cough a little bit, see little pock marks pop up on his face. That would be cool.
That would be cool. You know what I just realized they could have done, and I think would have been so much better? This just dawned on me. Did you ever see Executive Decision with Seagal and Kurt Russell?
I did. I actually also wrote about that for the Die Hard column.
Okay, yeah. Okay, here's what I think they actually could have done. What I think would have been better. If you remember in that film, the virus was this it was a massive piece of equipment. If you remember the chemicals that they had, these big things that were the size of briefcases. Here's what I propose they should have done is the virus itself is that size. It's in those cases. It is already on the train being escorted by the army or by the government, whoever. It's already on the train trying to get from, again, point A to point B. Van Damme is on there with his family, just so happens to be in the wrong place at the wrong time. We have the terrorists who come on board. We have the thief who comes on board, whatever. But the virus is already on the train like that, in that kind of capacity, rather than being carried around like a silly pocketbook or something. I think that would have been cool. That could have worked.
And then you could have a whole thing where like the terrorists would have to figure out a way to get it off of the train and things like that. And you would have an accident could happen and it still gets released and everyone starts getting sick on the train.
Yeah, no, that could have worked.
There's a number of ways that it could have been handled. She randomly kind of changes her appearance by putting on a blonde wig at some point. And there's this really weird, unnecessary, like half dramatic, ooh, I lost her for 3 seconds scene before he immediately finds her again and gets on the train with her. It's weird. It's unnecessary. They just needed something to do, I guess.
Yeah, unnecessary, but again, they're trying to establish that she is a she's a wildcat, man. She doesn't need a man. She doesn't need to be escorted in any kind of way. She's independent. She's fierce. I get all that. It works, but golly, I wish they would have done something more with that, toward the end.
Yeah, okay, so let's run down the rest of our characters. We get on the train, we meet the good side of people. So we meet a bunch of people I don't care about. There's a female violinist, there's a stereotypical Texas oil man, and there's fucking Ike Barinholtz for no reason. Not really him, but there's an Australian Ike Barinholtz on there.
Yeah, there's the Australian, there's the musician, and there's the American. And I feel like, when I said earlier that this is a European thing, I feel like, to let you know that he's an American, he is going to be a bit of a cocky prick who's in the oil business. Why he's on this train in Europe, we don't know. But, he's also a drunk as well. We'll just add that as well. Little character touches there.
Yeah,
it's
the
ridiculous.
Australian Ike Barinholtz, he's like, a loser with a lovely heart, and he's trying to get back to his girl, and blah, 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 heart of gold. And then there's a violinist who had just saved up and got her perfect violin that she's been trying to get for like 5 years or something. Who cares? And then a little bit later we meet the generic bad guy terrorist, and you have all the same tropes of that too. You have a wimpy hacker, you have the main bad guy that's has the strong accent and has some kind of presence. He has a love interest, second in command person. There's two connected baddies that are like in love with each other instead of being like brothers or something like they are in Die Hard. All the same kind of thing. There's the girlfriend that's like not Famke Janssen. There's the bad guy who looks so much like John Malkovich and acts like John Malkovich, but he's just low rent John Malkovich in this.
No, and there's an old saying, your film is only as good as its villain. And if you look at, I feel like Van Damme's best films, okay. We were talking last week, half the reason why, Universal Soldier worked so well is because, your villain is so good. And so if you look at a lot of Van Damme's best films, they also had those great villains. And I feel like one of the things that really hurts this film tremendously is the villain. That the main bad guy, portrayed by the actor, I had to look him up, but Thomas Arana, is so one note. I mean, he is so boring, and he does nothing. I mean, he's bad, and how does he let you know that he's bad? Oh, he's gonna smash the music, the violinist's violin, to let you know that he's a real prick, and that's all they do with him.
Yeah, and that's all they do with the female character too. That it's like, oh, she had this one line where she talks about her perfect violin that she got, and then the bad guy comes in and smashes her violin like a high school bully or something, instead of an eco-terrorist.
Yeah, no, the bad guy is the lead bad guy is so, like I said, he's so one note and just so ridiculous. What I found interesting though, I don't know if you looked him up or not, but he's had a pretty impressive career, especially since Derailed. He has been in Dark Knight Rises, Guardians of the Galaxy. He played Lord Montague in the 2013 version of Romeo and Juliet. So he is still working. He's getting some stuff. I wish he would have added. One of the only
people whose career went uphill after Derailed.
Went uphill. Yeah, no, I wish he would have. So he's an actor. He has the theater background. You would think he would have brought something to this, somewhat. It really is a shame that the bad guy is just so ridiculous.
Well, he's a third-rate Die Hard villain. That's really all he is. And not even in an entertaining way, not even an overly scene-chewing kind of way. It's just kind of bland for the most part.
Well, he's clearly trying to channel Alan Rickman, but the problem is he's not Alan Rickman, and Alan Rickman in Die Hard, if you want to go back to that one, he added so much to that character and to that role. This Thomas Arana is doing nothing and has, I know this is superficial, but he has this weird mark, like spot in between his eyes or whatever. I couldn't pick up that was a lump or something.
I think it was just a scar from some sort of thing. But no, he's definitely not Alan Rickman. He's much closer to like Jeremy Irons in Die Hard 3 than he is Alan Rickman in Die Hard 1.
Yeah, no, he's pretty forgettable and pretty ridiculous. But
I will say, an example of editing real quick, because I don't want to miss this. We're already kind of getting past where this is in my notes, but there's a strange edit that I noticed, and it's the scene where she's basically trying to like flirt with him and kind of trying to get something going with Van Damme. Because why not? They're stuck on a train. He's Van Damme. She's a lady. So this is a random cut that I happen to notice this time. There's her sitting down in the train car. She's kind of like beckoning him over to come sit down. He's standing up and just like...
I noticed that.
Yeah. So he's standing up and just kind of shaking his head. They cut to her like pull a pin out of her wig. And then they cut to Van Damme sitting down staring up at her.
I'm so glad you brought that up and I forgot to put that on my notes, but I had to rewind to that. That was the weirdest edit. Yeah, he was standing up and then he's sitting back down. I didn't, again, yeah,
and
that was a
like
weird...
He just sat down. That was like, she was sitting down where you can sit down in the train car, looking up at him standing in the doorway. Then it cuts to her pulling a pin out of a wig, and then it cuts to him and he's sitting down where she was, staring upwards as if she was just standing in the doorway.
Yeah, no, it's weird. It's weird. The editing is the biggest thing. And, if you read a lot of the reviews for this out there, most people will pull out the editing because it is, again, the directors and the editors attempting some new MTV type thing. And it just doesn't pay off. It looks more, it's more distracting than anything else. But yeah, I noticed that as well. I was like, wait, wasn't Van Damme just standing up there? And then he's back to sitting down and he's just staring at her. It's weird.
Well, so, and it's not even like that could have been an easy fix if he was like sitting down staring straight across at her or something, but he's literally looking upwards as if she is the one standing up.
Yeah, no, it's bizarre. Like I said, I had to rewind that because I thought it was so interesting. I'm glad that someone else noticed it as well.
Oh, I got several more of these mentioned throughout my notes. And I'm sorry, did you have something else you wanted to say before we move forward?
No, well, it's kind of jumping ahead, but there is one bad guy here who has actually been in, I counted it, 5 of Van Damme's films. But it is the blonde European dude who had the fiance, the girlfriend, and he and Van Damme have a pretty impressive fight. I imagine we'll get to that, but they have a pretty impressive fight. But I was looking at that guy.
Is he one of the stunt guys? Is he one of Van Damme's doubles?
He's not as one of his doubles, but he always plays a Van Damme dude. So we were talking last week about how Van Damme likes to cast some of the same people. But yeah, I'm watching that, and if you remember in Maximum Risk, the scene in the elevator that Van Damme has where he's fighting that big blonde dude, that was the same guy. And I remember thinking to myself, that's the same guy from Maximum Risk. But I looked him up. He has been in 5 of Van Damme's movies where he's played the bad guy. So, and this is a guy who he has fought. He was in The Quest, where he played the fighter from Greece. He was in Lionheart. He was in Cyborg. He was one of Fender's soldiers.
Oh.
So, this is a guy who Van Damme has comes back to and apparently works well with. And so that fight scene between, and I looked him up. His name is I'm going to probably say his name wrong, but it's Stefanos Miltsakakis.
Okay.
Yeah, but played in Van Damme's films, played in 5 of Van Damme's films. Interestingly, he's played characters with the name
he looks like someone kind of familiar, so I think I have probably seen him in a good amount of stuff before.
Yeah, and interesting, he's played a character by the name of Stavros 3 times in his career. So yeah, so like I said, that fight scene between he and Van Damme is one of the film's good moments, I guess, because that scene is done pretty well. But I attribute a lot of that to, again, Van Damme and, working with a stunt guy who he's worked with, obviously, clearly, multiple times before. That helps the scene at least.
That is true, because they obviously have a working relationship. It was probably a lot easier for them to choreograph that together as well. And also, that's why I was wondering if he was maybe one of his stunt doubles, because there are 2 people credited as his stunt double on this that have worked on about 5 or 6 of his movies as well as stunt doubles for him, like doing stunts or even choreographing stunts and things like that.
Interesting. Yeah,
but not a lot of the better movies. A lot of the not so good movies is what they've done.
Well, and it just goes to show, I feel like, okay, again, Van Damme is, accepting his current, place in the world of action, particularly direct-to-video action. I honestly feel that when he's hired on for one of these films, he has a clause in his contract where he says, okay, you want me to do this film, fine, but I'm going to bring on my people.
I need about 10 extra jobs.
Yeah, and you want me to star in this piece of crap? Let's be honest, that's what it is. You're gonna let me do some things my way, and I imagine
I'm gonna bring in my stunt team. My kid's gonna be in this movie. I don't care.
Yeah, you're gonna find a role for my kid. I don't care where he's gonna be in here. But I imagine the producers are like, hey, fuck it, we have Van Damme. Do what you want to do.
Yeah, if anything, be like, yeah, no, that's fine. Because at least like I said, that fight scene isn't that bad. But it's kind of his McClane and Carl fight from Die Hard. Like, instead of killing his brother, he killed his fiance. Which, by the way, how did he kill her? He gave her one punch and flipped her over and she died?
Yeah, no, I thought that was interesting as well. Again, that they're trying to add a little bit of flavor to some of these characters or whatever. Because, if you remember, that guy shouts out, you killed the love of my life, And so that, we know that he's
happened,
pissed.
And I was just like, wait, she's dead? Like, he gave her one little hit and then flipped her over, like, onto her back. I thought maybe she was just out for a second. How did he kill her?
Yeah, and again, that could have been, a really cool opportunity for the Galena character. She could have killed, again, if they want to establish her as being, this tough lady, they could have had her kill, that guy's girlfriend or whatever, and then that guy's going after her, and then Van Damme has to step in a little bit. I don't know. Little things like that they could have tried, but... Yeah,
well, I mean, the whole thing was just kind of weird. And she has a number of decent fight scenes in this as well. So, kind of getting back... his family comes to visit him. They get mad because they think he's boning this lady. And so, yeah, the terrorists start taking over right around that time. And also, one of the first things that happens during this is another weird editing thing, is that he is walking down a hallway in a train car with his gun, and it keeps, like, mini dissolving out, and it has him go forward about 2 feet at a time in the hallway. Like, he's walking down a hallway, and it's just, like, mini dissolve, and he's a little bit farther down the hallway. It does it, like, 4 times, mini dissolve. He's a little bit further down the hallway for no reason.
Well, and I wrote down some of the edits as well that I thought was ridiculous as well. But I remember that one. But if you remember when Van Damme is in the vents, okay, when jean-claude's in the vents or whatever, Galena is also in the vents, and so there's some weird edits where you get exterior shot of train. Then VD, it was in my notes. Van Damme's crawling through the vents.
I always refer to him as VD in my notes.
Okay, yeah. So you have exterior shot of train, Van Damme in the vents. Exterior shot of train, Galena's now in the vents. exterior shot of the train. I mean, they do that for at least a couple minutes, and if you remember, they do it again when Galena is, trying to make out with the lead terrorist or whatever. They do these bizarre edits where you have Galena is making out with him, then it goes exterior shot of the train, then Van Damme is climbing under the train, back to Galena making out. I mean, it's just these weird,
and during
dissolving
that,
shots.
there is this the whole unnecessary sex scene that happens, and it's all set to like cheap Cinemax music, like it's The Room or something. Like it's, but there's just like edgy action cuts in it. It's so weird.
Yeah, speaking of edits, I don't know if you picked up on this or not, but when Galena is in, and this is very brief or not, but I had to rewind it a couple times, but when Galena is in, I don't know if she's in the luggage cargo area or not, but she's fighting one of the terrorists or whatever.
The Wilhelm scream?
The Wilhelm scream! Yes, you picked up on that as well.
Yeah.
The Wilhelm scream comes out of nowhere. Like, I can understand if she threw him off the train and he fell off the train.
In the most mild fight scene. Like, literally, the fight scene just starts, and all he does is he, like, grabs her and tries to lift her up, and then he does a Wilhelm scream.
He did. When I feel like everybody, look, you're going to edit a film. You're going to put it, everyone knows, okay, the Wilhelm scream is when someone is flying off a cliff or someone goes out of plane, a high. You don't do the Wilhelm scream when a guy just gets, hit or whatever. It was so
It wasn't even
out of nowhere.
He literally, like, grabbed her and then I guess was trying to, like, pull her body weight over or something. It's like he got a hernia during it and just, like, let out this howl of a scream.
Oh, dude, and I think at this point, even in 2001, 2002, when this came out, the Wilhelm scream had been played and had been done. So it was just so weird seeing that come in here. But yeah, but I'm glad you noticed that as well. I was like, is this for real? They threw in the Wilhelm scream at this scene, and he's not even, I can see, okay, if you remember, if we're going to go forward a bit, the way the main terrorist guy, the Thomas Arana character,
that's
the way
where
he
it would have
dies,
worked.
That's where it would have worked. They should have done it there, but they do it this terrorist character who we don't see again, who has nothing, and you're gonna do it then? Like, is this for real? Okay, sorry. Okay.
Yeah, no, I was gonna point that out as well, but it's a Wilhelm scream in the most mild of fight scenes.
If we go forward, though, yeah, then there's the impressive fight scene with that Stefanos character, which really reminded me, mainly because it was the same two actors again, but it seemed like they were really trying to mimic the elevator fight scene and Maximum Risk, just these two characters rolling around on the floor.
Yeah, and it's actually, like I said, a decent fight scene. Like, there's a couple of decent moves. Like, there's a really cool, like, a spinning flip that Van Damme does. He's, like, kind of, like, in a little ball, and he kind of does like a forward flip in a very confined space. That was kind of cool. There's a good arm break, a brutal eye gouge during this. Like, it's actually probably the best fight scene in the movie.
Yeah, no, they're breaking bones, they're gouging out eyes. I mean, they're really, and again, I attribute a lot of this because of the two actors, but yeah, and it is a very brutal fight scene. I think under a better director, it probably would have looked definitely much cooler. I mean, compared to the scene in Maximum Risk that I think it's mimicking, you had Ringo Lam there at the helm. So that one, of course, is going to look a little better. But no, it works. I mean, considering this, again, is a cheap, very, very cheap Die Hard knockoff, that came out and that was, okay, it kind of reminded you, okay, Van Damme is in this and he's gonna try with what he's got.
Yeah, and speaking of stuff like Ringo Lam or just kind of ridiculous kind of action Hong Kong style fight scenes, there's one kind of like that in here, just done very poorly, and it's a split screen fight where you get to see Galena and Van Damme both have their own separate fight scenes within the same train car, and it's split screened. And so Galena's fighting like the main female terrorist, and Van Damme's fighting this dude terrorist that comes after him with a couple of forks. Like it's something out of fucking Double Team or something, or out of Knockoff.
Yeah, I noticed that as well. I was more distracted. I didn't even really notice the weapons. I was more distracted by the split screen thing. I just think that is so
it was terrible, but
distracting.
The dude attacked him with two forks. That's something out of like a Knockoff or something, or out of Double Team. I forget the guy's name that did that.
Choi Hark.
Choi Hark, yes, thank you.
Yeah, and that could work if you have Choi Hark or
Well, it seems like that weird
Ringo
kind
Lam
of like
directing
a
it.
Hong Kong style action that's almost like kind of silly and fun, but it's not handled well because it's like a third of the screen maybe is taken up because it's still framed like that, and they cut it so they do a split screen, but they also make it like boxes within the screen. It's not even full screen split screen.
Well, I think this Bob Mizurowski, the director of this, is trying to pull a Tarantino and just trying to, the thing is, though, is he's clearly not a Tarantino, but, he's trying to mimic and, ape a lot of the things that he thinks looks cool. I'm really curious now, after we have this conversation, I'm really curious just to check out Shark Attack, and I think he did another film called Air Panic or whatever,
Yeah.
but I'd be really curious to take a look at those and see if he's done a lot of these same ridiculous, distracting things with those, because it's not working here.
I feel like I totally saw the Shark Attack movie like on TV way back in the day, but I don't remember anything about it. I'm pretty sure I just watched it because it had Casper Van Dien in it, and I'll watch him in anything as well.
I wouldn't be surprised if it goes from Shark Attack to, gratuitous, sex scene to exterior shot of the beach, back to the Shark Attack,
Yeah, maybe a split screen of a Shark Attack and two people having sex at the same time, just like showing the dichotomy of life, man.
It's, like I said, it's ridiculous. It's oh my God. Yeah, no, and I mean, and again, this is so weird. I mean, every actor, especially Van Damme, they always have that Skeletor in their closet. That film that they're like, oh man, I just did this. And I can understand if this is something that Van Damme did a little earlier on, but he had already established himself, and for him to be doing just this this poor man's Under Siege ripoff, that came, 8 years after Under Siege 2 came out, it was just, like I said, it's so weird that,
8 years
that he
after,
signed
after
on for
his
this.
Die Hard ripoff as well, because that was also 95, his sudden death. But at the same time, I don't know, I feel like maybe this is the first time Van Damme maybe like felt that he was in direct-to-DVD purgatory, because at least when he first did it, like, yeah, okay, so maybe he couldn't have as big of films as he had before, but he was doing weird, interesting stuff, like Replicant, or like he was about to do In Hell, like he was getting decent scripts. But I think this is probably the first time he was just like, oh, these are the kinds of movies I make now.
Well, and I'm going to throw something else out there as well. Do you think maybe he was thinking to myself, you know what? My fans are going to see it. They're going to forgive me. Whatever. Let's just do it.
I'm Van
I almost
Damme,
kind of wonder
right?
if
Come
that was
on,
his
this
thinking.
is going to be fun.
Exactly.
They're going to at least like it for me. Yeah, not so much, guy.
Yeah.
Sorry. Okay,
No.
let's talk about another weird edit, but it's also something relevant to the plot. So during that fight scene we were just talking about, Galena ends up knocking the vials out of the female terrorist's hand, and they just like fall and break on the ground, and it gets all over her hands, and of course everyone in there immediately gets sick. There is a really funny, just like her screaming, "Oh no, I'm dead! We're all dead!" and just freaking out. But as the things are falling and about to break, it like dissolves everyone's faces together as they're reacting to it falling to the ground.
Oh no, yeah, I noticed that as well. Yeah, it kind of almost kind of freezes on all their faces.
Mm-hmm.
Again, that was Bob Mizurowski. Okay, we need to let the audience know that this virus is some deadly shit, and as it's fallen, we need to just show the dramatic impact. I was more caught up, and I was laughing at her frantically trying to close the pocketbook of Myra's back, trying to fix it.
Oh yeah, and just like
reminded me of that.
rubbing it off of her hands onto the back. Like, no, it's okay. We can fix this.
Yeah, no, she's playing it off. I mean, this is a really lame example, but if you remember in the Goonies where the statue, where Chunk breaks the statue or whatever, and they're trying to piece it back together, that's what this reminded me of. It was just so...
Yeah.
It was so ridiculous.
So what comes up next is a lot of, very Die Hard-esque stuff. A lot of model train work. Like, I'm totally repeating myself, but it just feels like someone had to buy a couple of like really expensive model train kits and was like, I'm getting my fucking money worth out of this. Like, I'm going to use it. I'm going to blow them up. It's going to look amazing.
Well, and, did you watch the behind the scenes making of special feature?
No, I did not.
No, you did not. Okay. They show it. I mean, and these train sets are, fairly impressive. I mean, for what they are. I mean, they show the technicians and, the special effects crew really putting a lot of time and precision and detail into these things. So that was one of the things. I mean, does it look ridiculous? Yeah, definitely. But that was one of the things where I was like, okay, you know what? I kind of went with it because I realized, okay, this is cheap. This is this direct-to-video, thing. But at least they're not relying 100% on CGI. I've always admired practical effects more so than the CGI, especially, back in the early 2000s. So I looked at this and I'm thinking, okay, you know what? Yeah, they're at least trying with what...
No, I love the fact that they do some practical effects, but it's just couched and surrounded by terrible CGI to where it just... Even that doesn't look good. Like, they have these model train sets where, yeah, it's kind of silly, it's kind of ridiculous, but if they had just gone with it, I would have been way on board. But it's the fact that they have this, and then they try to, add the CGI explosions to it, and add the terrible green screen, scene-by-scene comparisons with it. It doesn't work for me.
No, it doesn't work, and I mean, I'm sure we're going to get to this. We're getting close, I imagine. But, the final climactic scene where they're on the bridge or whatever, I mean, that right there, just, you can tell it's, okay, this is a stage of sorts. I mean, it just looks ridiculous. And the weird edit where when it does blow up and they're trying to get from one car to the other, that edit right there just looked it's so silly.
It's terrible. And honestly, again, I appreciate doing some practical effects. I just wish they would have stuck with that a bit more. And if it was going to be cheesy and silly, let it, instead of putting in what just makes it, even that, it makes it seem kind of cheap, but at least there's effort and skill in that. With the CGI just makes it look cheap without the effort and without the skill in it. And it's, at least, I mean, the model sets aren't great either, to be honest. It's the kind of stuff that would make the Thunderbirds blush. It's just very cartoony and cheesy, but it's something. It's something.
I just thought could have maybe salvaged this a bit. Is, I remember you talking about this as well. The original script for Sudden Death was meant to be a Die Hard parody. Mm-hmm. And I almost think, maybe if they would have made this a parody, that could have actually worked, because it's already doing the train, which has been done before. They have the model sets. If they had done that, that could have worked. That could have been...
It's kind of almost there. They just don't commit to it enough. They take it a bit too seriously. But yeah, that would have been fantastic if they would have actually just done this as a parody, because all of it is miniature train models and then terrible CGI and a bunch of fart rock all over the place. If they just would have leaned into that and they just would have made the cuts a bit sillier in between them jumping onto a train or jumping off of a train and then seeing a toy train fall to the side or something and then blowing up after the fact, maybe a second or two too late, that would have been amazing. Because you want to know something else that comes a bit too little too late in this movie? It's Van Damme on a motorcycle on top of a train.
Oh my God! So yeah, I'm glad we got to that. That entire sequence. Well, and that's maybe something that I don't think we've talked about, but Van Damme on a motorcycle is it's not in every one of his films. That's a slight Van Damme trope that they kind of hit upon. He has been on a bike in quite a few of his films. Yeah, and they throw that in here as well. I thought it was pretty ridiculous, him riding on, the top of the train on the motorcycle. However, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to say it, okay? I don't honestly think this scene is any more ridiculous than the motorcycle scene in Hard Target. So, I'm just going to throw that out there.
I don't think it's any more ridiculous. Actually, the one in Hard Target is way more ridiculous, but it still plays better. It's still filmed better.
No, it plays better, and you have John Woo doing that one. But
however, there was the perfect line when he actually jumps off of the train. Onto the other train, I think it is. One of the terrorists, his line is literally, "No fucking way." And I was like, that's my sentiment exactly. No way did he get air like that jumping between trains.
No, yeah, and I'm trying to remember. That shows you how forgettable the film is. But how did he get the motorcycle? How did he commandeer that? Was that just especially because trains go run through countrysides and everything. So how did he find a dirt bike?
I think it was just they somehow there was a car on the train that we never saw until they needed it for the plot. But he was hiding in a car because there was apparently they were holding cars, and apparently there was a motorcycle. It was just kind of they were holding people's cars while they're on the train.
Yeah, okay, that's right. I apologize. Yeah, no, obviously I didn't pay attention to that too much, but yeah, no, that's how he got on it. But yeah, him riding on top of the. I'm not saying it can't be done. I'm not a stuntman or anything like that, but I just found it interesting. This agent is able to has the skill and is able to do that and ride the top of this train with such precision and go from one car to the other like that. Pretty impressive, but hey, it's Van Damme, right? He can do it all.
Oh yeah. Well, I mean, during the whole motorcycle chase scene, like especially when he's getting back onto the train and stuff, I'm just like, oh, there he is. There's your stunt double. Thanks, guy. You're doing a good job.
Yep, there it is. Yeah, and some great green screen work, especially him. With the helicopter and everything, and then him, is this the point where he is able to? Doesn't he get from like the motorcycle to the ladder? And yeah, we see the great green screen in the background. It's pretty amazing.
And let me ask you this, because I have a theory on this. I believe they didn't have the money for a single helicopter in this movie. I don't think there is an actual helicopter. I think the helicopter is all models and CGI, and then later when they have those Apache helicopters, I'm pretty sure that's just stock footage.
Oh, that's easily stock footage. I'd really like to find the films that it's stock footage from, but yeah, no, it's stock footage. I have a feeling they may have ran out of, and this could attribute to the running time.
I mean, it could have been from like Airwolf or something, like the way it looked. It did look like it from a different time period, but yeah, I don't think they could afford a single actual helicopter. I think they had a little helicopter set, and I think they had some stock footage and some models and some CGI, and that's all they had.
I honestly think they may have ran out of money. You hear about a lot of these, low budget, cheap productions doing this, where they run out of money, midway through or whatever, and they just have to end the film, or they just have to, cut corners where they can. I can honestly see that happening here with this one.
Yeah, there's actually a pretty decently brutal death for the bad guy in this. So after, of course,
it's a cool death.
Yeah, after, of course, Van Damme thinks that he killed his son, or that his son is dead because of him, and we have that nice little scene of him emoting. He goes after him, and he's basically separating the train cars. He's like, hey, the front car will go out, and we'll try to stop this back one to stop the army, because the army's also going to blow them all up if they get past a certain point, because they don't want the virus to get out. So it's kind of similar to like Air Force One a little bit too, which was a few years before, where that was Harrison Ford's like Die Hard ripoff. Pretty much, it was Die Hard on Air Force One. But kind of a...
With the president.
Yeah, exactly. And Gary Oldman was the bad guy in that. And he basically had a similar death to where he was basically like strangled with like a cord or like his tie and that.
Yeah, no. Yeah, I did think the death scene was pretty cool. And, Thomas Arana, for being as one note as he is in this film, he acts that scene pretty well. I mean, it is a pretty cool film. That's one of the, the tropes of these, action films is, your main bad guy always has to have just such a spectacular death. And, it does work there.
Again, Willem Scream would have been perfect there, though. Like, as, he's being separated by the two train cars and he's stuck on one and has his leg stuck in the other. Like, and then Van Damme's kind of looking down and then all of a sudden you just hear that Willem Scream as he's being torn apart. That would have been perfect. Which, by the way, I think this is a nice little touch that I didn't notice the first time. But when it actually cuts back after, like, he's dead and you see the other train car moving away, don't you see his leg, like, stuck? Like, his torn-off leg just stuck in the train car?
I didn't notice that.
I think I did this time.
All right.
So after it actually, like, he tears him apart and you see Van Damme's reaction to it, and then it cuts and you don't see his body anymore, I think when you see the train car that's separated, like, going away where his leg was stuck, you see, like, his torn-off leg just hanging there on the train car.
You know what? I think I got to go back for Derailed viewing number 5. So I need to check this out again.
It was actually, I thought, a nice little touch that I totally didn't notice the first time.
That would be really cool. I can't believe I didn't notice that. All right, I need to go back and check this out. Okay, because that is a cool, unique, original little touch from this otherwise pretty cheap little film. So that would have been cool.
Okay, so of course everything works out okay. Van Damme saves the day. Not everybody gets killed. They quarantine everybody and are able to cure them. Okay, so the dude that set him up with the job initially, Lars or whatever, then they go and he kind of, I guess Van Damme figures out, or at least he just accuses him of like tipping off the main terrorist guy and letting them know where they were going to be and all this kind of stuff. and then he basically punches him, and then just tells like the general guy that's there is like, arrest this man, and he's like, gladly, and then they arrest him. He has no actual proof against this guy. He makes like 2 very bold accusations that he has no actual proof of, and then punches the dude and tells him, and he just gets arrested with no proof whatsoever.
And this goes back to the beginning when, you know, this guy offered him the job or whatever. I feel like they could have done so much more with this. You know, they could have made it to where that is Jean-Claude's close friend who he's been working with. And then what I think they should have done, if they were going to do that turn and have him be this turncoat type character, they really should have done it to where he enters the train, you know, in the last act. And so we find out that the main bad guy is not so much Thomas Arana, but is Jean-Claude's former mentor or, boss.
Yeah.
That would have been an interesting little turn. And then he and, they could have had a fight or a little, skirmish or whatever at that point. That would have been interesting. But yeah, it seems like it just comes in, too late or whatever. This is the guy who put Van Damme's life, on the line here, and he just punches him and says, arrest this man. No, they should have done something more with that.
And again, no proof. Like, he shouldn't have been arrested without actually having some kind of proof. And that's the thing, is that I don't know so much about having him come onto the train, because I feel like that just would drag this movie out even more. But you could have tossed something while he was on the train where he just actually, I don't know, discovered something that he was involved. Or even if it was the bad guy saying, like, we have to get here to make this deal with Lars or whatever. Just something to where he's like, oh no, my friend. Instead of just coming off the train and be like, you know what? Something felt fishy there. I bet you set me up. Punch. Arrest this man.
Well, I feel like, maybe not have him come on the train, but I feel like it would have made the main villain character, it would have made a little more sense for that, because like I said, his character is just so, basic and one note. If we would have found out, I always found that interesting when a lot of action films do that, where the bad guy who you think is the main bad guy isn't so much the main dude, is actually,
hired by someone that's close.
That would have, that would have made, that would have made the villain a little more memorable in this entire thing, But yeah, they just kind of throw that away. And again, I think it's great that, Jean-Claude and his wife were able to reconcile and, be happy and everything again. But I found it just to be a little too ridiculous, the fact that he and his family are not, he has this double agent career or whatever, that his family is not
even going to question
him anymore about.
Yeah, not even going to question.
They don't even question
I guess you're a secret agent, crime fighter guy. Okay, that's cool. That makes sense. We kind of thought that the whole time, but you just didn't tell us.
They don't even mention it. And again, I go back to, I feel like, okay, you know what, maybe if he wasn't a full-on family man, but I honestly think they could have tightened this up and filled in a lot of those plot holes.
Yeah, because
much more.
It seemed like it was doing a little bit of like a True Lies thing, just without actually exploring that at all. And let me talk to you about this. Okay, so the last time we see Galena, Laura Herring's character in the movie, I guess is towards the end of that. But okay, so at the end, she is a thief and everything, but she was also sick. Like, she is having smallpox. Like, you could tell she was getting way more sick than Van Damme or anyone else was in that little group. Van Damme asks, where's Galena at? And the left's like, oh, I bet we'll see her again, or I bet she'll pop up somewhere. It's like, what do you mean someplace? Like, she would be there. Everyone there is quarantined. She's gonna be in that little group that you're in right now. She was sick also, but it more acts like maybe she just like slipped out the back when no one was watching, which she still would have been infected with smallpox.
She slipped out the back, and this is what I really felt insulting. I mean, it was at this point where, again, I feel like that they ran out of money in the budget or in the story, but just the final shot of the film where, yeah, it ends with Galena stealing some random diamonds.
Yeah, of course she goes back to being a thief.
Who these diamonds are from. Yeah, of course she's going to go back to being a thief. You know, what I thought is, I was thinking to myself, okay, I think they should have brought this character full circle. Rather than just, having to end her stealing some random diamonds from someone who we have no idea how she got. I mean, we have no idea where she is, where these diamonds come from, anything like that. So I'm thinking to myself, okay, maybe they should have had it come full circle. How cool would it have been? I mean, not cool, excuse me, but I think it would have been a little better if maybe they have her stealing from the main terrorist dude or something like that. Or maybe, the turncoat who double-crossed Van Damme, if maybe she finds his address and maybe she is stealing something from him.
Yeah,
actually, you know what I mean? That would have been a little forgivable.
That would have made sense. That would have been something. However, I have to say, the first time I watched this, as soon as it said the end, as soon as it like irised out on her stealing those diamonds. I turned it off immediately. Didn't stop, didn't do anything.
Okay.
I did not make that mistake this time.
Yeah.
I sat through the credits, and holy shit, there is a hip-hop theme song to this movie where he's kind of saying the plot of the movie like it was made in 1992.
Oh my god, yeah, no, that is another trope of those films in the 90s, yeah. I noticed that as well, man. I don't know. I honestly don't know. I think maybe Bob Mizorowski has he's pulling on some influences. He's trying to ape some things that he's seen done before, and he, contracted maybe his son's buddy to put together a hip hop song to this. I don't know, man. It's like I said, it's weird. It's so. Well, I guess no, it doesn't beat Body Count.
Body Count.
Body
No.
Count in the House by
No,
Ice-T.
absolutely not. But it's a nice touch. Okay, so here we are. We're at the end of the movie now. It's that time. It's time for the Van Dammage rating. On a scale of 1 to 10, this movie to Bloodsport. What score are you going to give this movie as a Van Damme film?
Okay, well, I'll actually go the other direction. As a film itself, just as a regular movie itself, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to give it a 2, okay? Because I do think the practical effects that they do attempt here are noble. The character of Galena, I think, is an interesting, unique little touch that maybe they should have done a little more with. As a Van Damme film, I will say that Van Damme is actually the shining star in this entire thing. He's actually trying his best in this one. So as a Van Damme film, I'm going to say a 4 because he is emoting some emotion. He's still doing some fighting. He's not doing that full on 360 kick, but he is he's trying with what he has in this. There's some scenes where you can tell he's sleepwalking a little bit, but there are other scenes where he is bringing it. And I will say, if you look at some of the things that Van Damme has done later in his career, I would say that his performance in Derailed is a notch above, some of the stuff that he's done more recently, my opinion.
Well, I'm going to go ahead and average that out to a 3.
Okay, there you go.
Okay. So me, surprise, surprise, I'm giving it a 10 out of 10. It's amazing. No, you would think, of course, I would give it a 1. I've been using it as a reference point to the whole scale the entire time I've been doing the show. But, here's where the twist comes in. I'm giving it a 2. I'm doing this.
Hey, all
I'm
right.
doing this for 3 reasons. One of which, this movie almost got a 3 from me. And it was all because of that last song, that hip-hop song. That was such out of nowhere that I was like, that's kind of worth another point. But I ended up not giving that point because you want to know why? There's no credit for that song. They didn't credit anyone with that song. I can't figure out who did that song, anything like that. The only way I was able to find it on YouTube so that I could use it for this podcast was to just search Derailed 2002 song, and the only video is just a video of the end credits. I can't find out who did it. I can't find out there's no credit in the actual end credits for who did the song or what it is or who it's by. So I took away that point.
Here's what I find amazing, man. I just have to ask. Hold on, wait a minute. Okay, you didn't bother watching the special feature, the making of. Yeah, you stayed for the end of the credits for that song.
Well, as soon as I started hearing that song, I was like, man, I gotta figure out who did this song so I can look it up. So I sat through the credits and I waited, and there was no credit for this song. So I had no idea who did it, and so I had to do some searching around, and I could not find anywhere who actually did this song. The only thing I found was a video on YouTube of the end credits.
Interesting. Well, I will say, if you do decide to go back and check out the making of, what is really interesting about it is everybody who they interview, and they don't interview too many. They interview the director, they interview Jean-Claude, and they interview the gal who plays Galena. Jean-Claude does not speak about the film at all, really. It's really interesting. He gives a pretty charismatic interview, but he talks about working with his son, and he talks about the direction his career is going and the types of roles that he is picking up on. But he does not talk about the film. No, excuse me, I take that back. He does talk about what it's like filming in Europe, but he does not talk about the film, his character,
But he's doing quite a bit of that
like
around
that.
this time. So yeah, no, that probably is a pretty good reason for that. Okay, so that was one of the reasons that it is a 2 for me. I gave it 1 point because it's not quite as bad as I remember. It's still pretty bad, but I had it built up in my head as being the most god-awful thing ever, and it's really bad, but it's not quite that bad. And I gave it one more point, just because there's still some Van Damme movies I have not seen. And doing this podcast, I'm eventually going to see them, and what if one of them is worse than Derailed? I have to have somewhere on the scale to put them. So I'm giving Derailed a 2 for those two reasons. One, because it's not quite as bad as I remember, and two, just in case anything down the line is worse than this, I have to have a spot for it.
Well, and Van Damme, he definitely still brings his charisma that he has to this. I would say that, if it wasn't for him being in this film would nearly be unwatchable.
It would be The Last Siege with Jeff Fahey, is what it would be.
Yeah, and this wouldn't even, this would be something that wouldn't even get, a rental or even really a glance by me in the video store shelves back when we had video stores. But yeah, thankfully, because Van Damme is in it, that is why I've seen it the few times that I have.
Yeah, well, I've seen it twice now, and that's kind of good for me. You kept saying, like, hey, if you watch this behind-the-scenes thing, I'm not going to watch the behind-the-scenes. I think I'm kind of done with Derailed for a really long time, unless I'm just, I don't know, unless I'm just in a weird mood and kind of hate myself and I'm drunk or something, then I might put it on one night, just as a little bit of self-torture or something, and just be like, I've seen this 3 times now, and just be angry at myself. I don't know.
Well, and what is such a shame about this one, to be honest, is I don't even think this would be one to have fun and drink with. I really don't. You know what I mean? This isn't even really one that you can do shots with and have fun with. I guess if you wanted to do like of goofy editing or whatever, but this one isn't even so much. It's not even really so much fun to laugh at. I mean, obviously you and I were laughing at some of the things about it, but I think there's so many other fun films that you can watch and get drunk to if you wanted to. This isn't. It's just kind of sad, to be perfectly honest.
That is very true. So that was Derailed, and I know kind of last time you didn't have a whole lot to plug. I don't know if you want to plug anything else, but I will say, still talking to you about doing that Dolph Lundgren podcast, and I hope you do it. And if so, I'm going to have you back on to plug it then. And I also want to be a guest on your show.
No, most definitely. The ball is actually slowly getting rolling on that. I'm just trying to get some things set up. And to my knowledge, there is not another one out there. So I'm really trying to kind of strike while the iron is hot and get that going before anything else does get out there. But yeah, no, you will most definitely be on there with me for a few of the films. Because as bad as you think this one gets, old Dolph has quite a few that are a blast to talk about. One of which I will just tell you right now. Okay, I'll just tell you right now. Dolph did one around the same time as this one, called Agent Red, which also tackles the whole virus cliche, which coincidentally is also concealed in a compact pocketbook as well. So,
well, and again, eventually I'm going to get around to watching the Dolph Lundgren Die Hard in a rock stadium or at a rock concert film Command Performance.
And that one is at least unique because it's Die Hard at a rock concert. Van Damme does this Die Hard on a train. It's
which, by the way, in Command Performance, isn't he like a drummer? Isn't he basically like John McClane, but he's a drummer in the band?
He is a drummer in the band who happens to have
military skills,
military operative skills. I mean, the thing about that one is it's silly, it's ridiculous, but Dolph, he was also the director of that one. He was the writer and the director, so he knew what he was working with, and it plays. The tone is just right with that one, much more so than Derailed. It's not this haphazard hodgepodge, amalgam of cheapness that Derailed is.
Cool. Well, once again, thank you very much for being on, Sean. Thank you for helping me get through this slog, this thing that I was dreading for so long. I'm glad it's done with, and now I get to move on to something more fun next episode.
Yeah, most definitely. Well, hey, thanks for having me back, man. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. And, follow us on Twitter, pod_Damme, Crust Celluloid. We're on all the podcatchers and all that nonsense. And we'll see you here next time on Jean-Claude Van Damme.
Derailed. Hey, yo, peep this. Can you keep a secret? Can't believe this. Situations I go through just to keep this family alive. Mission completed. Survived another 48 hours. Undercover, couldn't tell my lover. Cause only God knows that I love her too much to give her pressure like UGO. Yo, my life is like Cousteau, shark fishing in the deep blue sea with no oxygen, boxing in the twilight zone with no home. Got a house in every major city, like Frank Nitti, James Bond, or the new millennium. We killing them softly like Roberta Flack, but I'm derailed till I get my baby back. We blow gas, pay no tax. UGO's flows arrest your cardiac. SI click, we on the map, but for now I'm just derailed. Derailed.